My name is Clarissa, and I'm 38 years old, and as I watched the video of my own funeral, I realized not one person there truly knew me. It's strange watching people cry over a coffin that doesn't hold your body. Stranger still when those tears are for appearances, not love. The day I was declared dead, the world kept turning, and my family, the same people who had ignored me for years, turned my funeral into a social event. There were designer dresses, whispered gossip, and cameras snapping like I was some celebrity who'd gone too soon. I sat in a dim room, safe in the shadows, watching it all unfold on a laptop screen. The live stream buffering every few seconds, as if even technology hesitated to show me the truth. I had once imagined my funeral as a quiet affair, a few close friends sharing gentle words about my kindness or my stubbornness. But what I saw instead was a parade of greed. Naomi, my sister, stood at the front row in a black veil that couldn't hide the satisfaction in her eyes. My cousins whispered behind her, already discussing what they thought they might inherit. No one spoke about my laughter, or my stubborn loyalty, or how I built our father's company from near ruin after his death. They spoke only of the fortune he'd left, and how much of it had become mine. I never meant for it to end this way. After my father passed, I tried to keep the family together. I gave Naomi a position in the company, tried to involve my cousins, offered them shares. But money is poison when it seeps into family veins. The more I gave, the more they wanted, until generosity became a weapon used against me. Every argument ended with accusations. Every gathering turned into a negotiation. By the time I turned 37, the people I'd loved most had become strangers with outstretched hands. Then came the diagnosis. Terminal cancer. 1 year, maybe less. The words hung in the air like smoke. My doctor tried to sound hopeful, but her eyes betrayed her pity. For weeks, I walked through life as if underwater, everything muffled, every face distorted. And then something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't want my legacy to be a feeding frenzy. If I was going to die, it would be on my terms. I wouldn't let greed write my ending. So, I began to plan. I hired a hospice nurse named Gemma, kind, discreet, and more trustworthy than anyone in my bloodline. She listened when I told her I didn't want my death to follow the usual script. She didn't flinch when I mentioned disappearing. Instead, she said, "If that's what peace looks like for you, then we'll find a way." It took months of careful preparation, closing accounts, selling property quietly, transferring ownership under aliases. My assistant, Fiona, helped without question. Together, we built a story the world would believe. Clarissa, the lonely businesswoman who went on a private retreat and never came back. As I watched my funeral that day, I realized something liberating. Death had freed me from their expectations. In their eyes, I was gone, a tragic loss wrapped in expensive flowers. But in truth, I was finally alive, breathing clean air for the first time in years. I no longer belonged to them, their judgment, or their greed. The camera at the funeral panned across the guests, capturing every fake tear and forced smile. Naomi leaned in to whisper something to my lawyer, and they both laughed. My heart hardened like stone. I clicked pause and shut the laptop. My reflection stared back at me in the dark screen, pale, hollow-eyed, but burning with purpose. They thought they'd buried me. They had no idea I'd already begun writing the next chapter. And none of them knew that I was watching from just beyond the grave. The plan started the day my doctor told me I had less than a year to live. That sentence still echoes in my mind, like the hum of a refrigerator that never truly stops. I remember sitting on the stiff leather chair in Dr. Howard's office, staring at the scan on the wall. The glowing white mass looked like a cruel little secret hiding in my own body. "We'll do everything we can," she said softly. But I could tell by the way she avoided eye contact that hope wasn't on the list of treatments. I left her office with a strange calmness, not despair. If time was all I had left, then I was going to use it wisely. That night, I sat at my father's old oak desk and opened the folder that held every legal document connected to my estate. My fingers trembled as I looked at the numbers, millions in investments, properties, and the business he'd built from nothing. I realized then how heavy an inheritance really was. Every dollar was a chain, binding me to people who didn't love me, just wanted what I had. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at the moon outside my window, and whispered, "I won't let them have it." That whisper became a vow. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. A stoic man with sharp suits and sharper instincts, he'd handled my father's affairs before me. "I want to revise my will," I said. His tone shifted immediately, cautious, calculating. "Of course, Clarissa. Any specific changes?" I paused, knowing that one wrong word could tip my hand. "Yes," I said, "but we'll need to do it in stages, quietly." He didn't ask questions, which is why I trusted him. It was Gemma, my hospice nurse, who helped me shape the emotional side of the plan. She wasn't just there to check vitals, she listened to the silences between my sentences. One afternoon, as she prepared my medication, I asked, "If you had the chance to rewrite your ending, would you take it?" She smiled faintly. "Every day." That was all I needed to hear. From then on, she became my partner in something far greater than death, a rebirth. I started by transferring small portions of my wealth into anonymous charitable accounts. Women's shelters, orphanages, cancer research centers, all under coded aliases. Each transaction was a piece of my heart being returned to the world. Fiona, my assistant, helped disguise the transfers as corporate grants. She was meticulous, clever, and loyal. "Are you sure you want to give it all away?" she asked one night. I nodded. "I want my money to outlive me, not my family's greed." Mr. Reynolds drafted my new will with surgical precision. On paper, it looked perfectly ordinary assets distributed among relatives, a few charities mentioned for good measure. But hidden in legal jargon were instructions only I, Gemma, and Fiona understood. Codes disguised as section numbers, references to fake properties that led to donation trusts. It was, in its own way, a masterpiece of deceit. As my health declined, the visits from my family became more frequent, not out of love, but curiosity. Naomi brought flowers one afternoon, her perfume filling the sterile air. "You're looking better," she said, her smile rehearsed. I almost laughed. "You mean I'm not dead yet?" She didn't answer. I could see her calculating, wondering how much time she had before the reading of my will. Every night after they left, I sat by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker like dying stars. My body was weak, but my mind burned brighter than ever. I'd spent years being their target, their scapegoat, their golden goose. Now, I was turning their greed into their lesson. When Gemma brought me the final signed documents, she looked at me with quiet pride. "It's done," she said. I felt a strange peace wash over me. My affairs were in order. My story was ready, but I was already planning my own funeral without them realizing it. To pull off a fake death, you need 3 things: trust, timing, and a believable tragedy. The first time I said those words out loud, Gemma laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. But when she saw the seriousness in my eyes, the laughter died in her throat. I had spent months sketching out possibilities on paper: car crash, fire, accident, but none of them felt right. I needed something that could explain a missing body, something nature itself could help me hide. That's when the idea came to me: a boating accident. I'd been sailing since I was a teenager. Everyone knew the ocean calmed me. So when news broke that my illness had worsened, no one would question me retreating to the sea one last time. Gemma hesitated at first, worried about the moral and legal risks. But I told her the truth, that I wasn't escaping justice, just reclaiming my peace. I would rather vanish than let them feed on my dying body. I think she understood, even if it broke her own moral compass a little. Together, we began orchestrating the illusion. Fiona was brought in next. Her job was to control the flow of information, cancel meetings, forward emails, tell people I was traveling for treatment. The first stage was paperwork. Fiona purchased an old wooden sailboat under a fake name, registered in another county. We made sure it looked like something I would have impulsively bought in my emotional state. Gemma filled my medicine bottles with harmless pills in case authorities searched for toxins later. Every move we made was designed to look tragically plausible. On a foggy morning in late March, I drove to the marina with a single suitcase, dressed in a raincoat and scarf. The sea air stung my lungs, sharp and cold. Gemma followed me in a separate car, pretending to see me off. I hugged her goodbye by the pier. "No turning back now," I whispered. "No," she said softly. "Just forward." The plan was simple. I'd sail out just far enough to lose sight of the shore, then switch boats. A small rescue vessel, manned by a retired fisherman named Paul, another trusted accomplice, waited 2 miles out. We had met weeks earlier through Gemma, who vouched for his silence with a generous donation to his family. He would tow the wooden boat further, damage it to look wrecked, and let it drift. The Coast Guard would find it days later, floating aimlessly with no trace of me. That's exactly what happened. The headlines appeared within 48 hours. Local businesswoman lost at sea, body presumed gone. I remember sitting in a small motel room by the shore, wrapped in a blanket, watching the news. My photograph, the same one they used for company press releases, flashed across the screen. My name was now past tense. Clarissa was. That single word hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I almost cried. Almost. By the end of the week, my death became official. My family held a press conference outside the company headquarters. Naomi wore a black dress and pearls, pretending to be the grieving sister. She was complicated, she told reporters, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. My cousins stood behind her, nodding solemnly. I knew them too well. Their tears were already drying into calculations. Meanwhile, Fiona managed the estate's immediate logistics. She pretended to be overwhelmed by grief, while secretly following every step we had planned. Mr. Reynolds, the lawyer, stayed silent about my private will, waiting for the official funeral to begin the legal process. Everything was going exactly as designed. From my hiding spot, I began recording my voice diaries, a way to keep track of time and emotion. Each night, I spoke into a small recorder, my thoughts, my fears, my satisfaction. "They'll never know," I whispered into the static. "They'll never understand." And yet, a part of me felt both powerful and small, like a ghost tethered to her own secret. I wasn't dead, but I didn't fully exist either. I was watching my old life like a movie where I already knew the ending. But none of them knew the funeral was the beginning, not the end. From my safe house by the sea, I watched them squabble over my legacy. The cottage I stayed in sat on a narrow stretch of coastline, tucked between cliffs and wind-blown grass. It wasn't much, 2 small rooms, peeling paint, and a fireplace that smoked more than it burned, but it was freedom. The ocean became my only companion, its rhythm steady and uncaring. Every morning, I made tea and turned on the small television to watch the circus my death had created. My name was everywhere. The local papers called me the mysterious heiress. My company's board called emergency meetings to decide what to do with my shares. But the most entertaining part was watching my family. They couldn't even wait for my ashes to settle before tearing each other apart. Naomi was the loudest voice, naturally. She claimed she should inherit controlling interest in the company, citing our father's intentions. The cousins weren't far behind, all waving supposed memories of what Dad had promised them. Fiona, playing her role perfectly, acted heartbroken but distant. She told them she was too devastated to talk about business. In reality, she was feeding me updates daily through encrypted emails. Every word of theirs was ammunition for my satisfaction. One afternoon, Fiona sent me a video clip from a news segment. In it, Naomi and 2 of my cousins stood outside the family mansion, shouting at each other. "You're stealing from her," Naomi screamed, pointing at the eldest cousin. "Valerie, you think you deserve it? You never cared about her," Valerie fired back. "At least I visited her in the hospital." The irony nearly made me spill my tea. None of them had come to see me unless they thought it would benefit them. Now, they were fighting for pieces of a life they'd taken for granted. Gemma came by every few days, bringing groceries and supplies. She'd laugh when I played the news aloud. "You really broke them," she'd say. "They'll break themselves," I'd reply. But underneath the satisfaction, I began to feel something else, a quiet sadness. These were people I once called family. I had wanted to teach them a lesson, not destroy them completely. Still, greed has its own gravity, and they were all being pulled into its orbit. A week later, Fiona told me they were planning a memorial gala in my honor. I couldn't believe the audacity. A gala for me, the woman they'd never appreciated alive. "They want to turn it into a charity fundraiser," she said, "but the money's going straight into their pockets." That's when a new idea began forming. If they wanted to celebrate my memory, I'd give them a memory they'd never forget. I spent nights drafting letters, designing invitations, and instructing Fiona to work with Mr. Reynolds discreetly. The event would indeed happen, but on my terms. The invitations would promise a surprise announcement about my estate, something to draw every vulture to the same room. I would ensure my message reached them all at once. Meanwhile, the mansion my father built became a battlefield. Naomi ordered workers to divide it between heirs, literally marking rooms with painter's tape. Fiona sent me photos of Naomi labeling doors. Living room Naomi, library Valerie, basement storage auction. It was grotesque. They were dissecting the body of my family history like scavengers. And yet, watching from afar, I began to see the beauty of what I had done. My absence had revealed their true faces to the world. Reporters started calling them the greedy heirs, publishing stories about their public outbursts. My reputation, ironically, became that of a generous woman tragically surrounded by opportunists. In death, I was finally loved, or at least admired. One evening, the sun dipped behind the waves, painting the sky blood orange. I sat outside with Gemma, listening to the distant gulls. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath. "Not yet," I said. "But I might someday." Because as satisfying as revenge could be, I knew it came with a cost, and the bill was always due eventually. And they'd all walk right into it. The charity gala was announced as a tribute to my life, but it was really my trap. It was almost poetic, really. The same family who had mocked my generosity when I was alive now planned to profit from my charitable legacy. Naomi took the lead in organizing what she called the Clarissa Memorial Benefit Gala. She sold the story to the press, a moving evening to honor her beloved sister's philanthropic spirit. The hypocrisy was nauseating, but it gave me the perfect stage. If they wanted a show, I would give them one with a front row seat to their own unmasking. From my safe house, I worked closely with Fiona and Mr. Reynolds to shape the event exactly as I needed. Fiona, ever the quiet genius, oversaw the logistics from within. She ensured every detail followed my instructions, down to the theme, Legacy of Light. It sounded innocent enough, but it was the title of one of my hidden donation projects, a clue that would only make sense later. Mr. Reynolds prepared the legal side, drafting a letter to be read aloud at the event. He didn't know all of my intentions, but he knew enough to trust my reasons. Naomi spared no expense. The gala was to be held at our father's mansion, freshly renovated and gleaming under rented chandeliers. The guest list included business partners, socialites, and the local press. They wanted admiration, not remembrance. Every conversation, every outfit, every toast would be a photo opportunity. And every camera there would capture exactly what I wanted the world to see, their greed in full display. The night of the gala, Fiona wore a black gown and an earpiece that connected her to me through a hidden phone line. I sat miles away, in my little coastal cottage, my laptop glowing with the live feed she had set up. I could see the guests arriving, Naomi greeting them with fake warmth, reporters snapping pictures as she dabbed her eyes dramatically. I could almost smell the expensive perfume and deceit mingling in the air. At 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. The guests took their seats, sipping champagne and whispering about the announcement that was promised. Naomi took the stage, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. Clarissa was the kind of woman who believed in giving, she said, her hand pressed against her chest. Tonight we honor that spirit by continuing her mission. My fingers clenched around my tea mug. I wanted to laugh. That woman had once called charity a waste of time. Then came Mr. Reynolds. He stepped up to the podium, holding an envelope sealed in wax. Before her passing, he began. Clarissa left behind a personal message for tonight's gathering. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter. I could see Naomi's face tighten as he read aloud. To those gathered here in my memory, his voice echoed, thank you for attending. I hope you're not here to count guests, but to count your blessings. True worth isn't measured by possessions, but by the lives we touch. The room fell silent. Naomi shifted uncomfortably. Then Mr. Reynolds stepped aside, and Fiona gave the cue. The massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. At first, it showed my portrait, the same one from the funeral. Then the image dissolved into a video. My voice filled the hall. If you're hearing this, I said calmly, it means you came to celebrate my death. I appreciate the effort truly. But tonight, I want to share what you were all too blind to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd as my face appeared on the screen, alive and composed, sitting at my father's old desk. Naomi's mouth fell open. No, she whispered, standing abruptly. Valerie clutched her pearls. Some guests murmured, thinking it was a pre-recorded message filmed before my passing, but then I smiled. Don't look so surprised, I said. You always underestimated me. The lights dimmed further. My message continued. I spoke about love, greed, and legacy, but mostly, I spoke about truth. Naomi looked ready to faint. Fiona, standing in the corner, watched everything unfold with quiet satisfaction. From miles away, I whispered to myself, let them see who I really was. And then, my face appeared on the screen alive. You should have seen Naomi's face when she realized I wasn't a ghost, just smarter than her. I had imagined that moment for months, the instant when the truth sliced through the lies, like lightning in a dark room. But even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have scripted Naomi's expression better. Her perfectly powdered face turned ghost white as my image filled the screen. Around her, people froze mid-sip, mid-whisper, mid-breath. The only sound was my voice echoing through the grand hall of the mansion she'd tried to claim. I know why you're here, my recorded self said. Not to honor me, but to see what you can still take. So tonight, let me show you what I've already given. The screen cut to footage Fiona and I had carefully compiled, scenes of children laughing in shelters, women receiving scholarships, hospitals unveiling new wings, all funded anonymously. I'd filmed some of it before my disappearance, the rest compiled by Fiona afterward. Each clip bore the same simple tag, the Clarissa Foundation. Gasps spread through the crowd. My voice narrated over the images. While you counted my money, I counted the lives changed by it. Naomi stumbled back, gripping the edge of a chair for balance. Valerie whispered, "Is this real?" But Naomi didn't answer. She was too busy trying to process the fact that her inheritance, her golden ticket, had been poured into strangers' hands. The camera zoomed in on her pale face, the media's lenses catching every twitch. I had made sure the video would be released publicly at the same time. My death, my funeral, and now my resurrection, all neatly documented for the world to witness. The recording continued. I named each person who had tried to manipulate me: Naomi for exploiting my illness to gain control of the company, Valerie for forging documents, 2 cousins for draining accounts through family loans. Their secrets, laid bare in front of reporters, business associates, and so-called friends. To my dear family, I said in the video, thank you for teaching me what love is not. The audience erupted, whispers, gasps. even laughter from a few bold souls. Fiona later told me it was chaos. Naomi shouted that it was a lie, that someone had edited the footage, but the damage was already done. Cameras caught every word, and within hours, social media was ablaze with headlines. Dead heiress returns exposes greedy family in shocking video. In my seaside cottage, I sat motionless, watching it all unfold. The news anchors replayed the clip on loop, analyzing every second. They called me the ghost philanthropist, a woman who'd turned her death into a lesson. Donations to my foundation skyrocketed overnight. I watched children holding up hand-painted signs that said, "Thank you, Clarissa," on the morning news. For the first time in years, I smiled a real one. But Naomi wasn't done. Within days, she released her own statement, claiming my video was a deepfake, a cruel hoax meant to tarnish her reputation. She hired lawyers to challenge my estate, even though there was no estate left to claim. Fiona and Mr. Reynolds handled everything quietly, ensuring the legal trail stayed sealed. Still, Naomi's persistence disturbed me. I underestimated how deeply her greed ran. A week later, Fiona sent me a warning. Naomi had begun digging through my old medical records and travel logs. "She's looking for proof you're alive," she said over the encrypted call. "She won't stop until she finds it." I wanted to believe it was just desperation that Naomi would tire out once her public image was ruined. But I knew her better. When a person's identity is built on envy, losing the object of that envy feels like death itself. I stared out at the sea that night, the waves turning silver under the moonlight. The victory felt hollow, almost fragile. Yes, I had won. I had exposed them all. But revenge has a strange aftertaste, sharp at first, then bitter, then strangely empty. Still, I reminded myself, I wasn't ready to regret it. Not yet. I'd lived my truth, and they'd choked on theirs. But deep down, I could feel the tide changing, pulling something dark toward me again. But Naomi wasn't going to let me stay dead for long. I should have known Naomi wouldn't accept defeat, not when money was involved. In the days following the gala, my life grew eerily quiet. The media frenzy started to fade, replaced by new scandals, new stories. But Naomi? She didn't fade. She was like a shadow that refused to lift, always lurking at the edges of my peace. Fiona's updates grew more frequent, more cautious. Naomi had begun hiring private investigators, not just one, but several, each tracing different fragments of my past. She was following the money, chasing bank accounts and paper trails like a bloodhound on the scent of survival. I underestimated her persistence. She started by questioning the legitimacy of the charities I'd funded. When that failed, she began tailing Fiona. One afternoon, Fiona called me, whispering into the phone. She came to my office, she said. She asked how I could live with myself, helping a liar. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, but she didn't believe me. I told Fiona to stay calm, to keep her routine. But the fear in her voice lingered even after the call ended. Naomi wasn't acting out of anger anymore, this was desperation. Her world had collapsed, and she needed someone to blame. Meanwhile, I was trying to live quietly in a small inland town 2 hours from the coast. The cottage by the sea had become too risky. I rented a modest home with faded wallpaper and a crooked porch, using a new alias and forged documents Gemma had helped me acquire. I even dyed my hair darker and started wearing glasses I didn't need. I told myself I'd live out whatever time I had left in peace. Reading, painting, maybe even feeling alive again. But peace has a way of slipping through the cracks when your past keeps knocking. The stress didn't help my health. My illness, which had stabilized for a while, began to stir again. The fatigue hit harder. The pain crept back. Gemma came to visit. Her eyes clouded with concern. "You can't keep hiding like this forever," she said gently as she changed my IV bag. "Sooner or later, she'll find you." I looked away, watching the sunlight flicker through the blinds. "Then I'll disappear again," I murmured. "I've done it before." Gemma sighed. Clarissa, disappearing isn't living. Her words hit me deeper than I expected. For months, I had been trapped between two lives, the one I'd buried and the one I couldn't quite live. I thought revenge would bring me freedom, but instead, it had built me a gilded cage. I had outsmarted everyone, yet here I was, running from a ghost named Naomi. Fiona's next message came late at night. She's close. It read, "One of the investigators found your fake ID pattern. She's narrowing it down." My heart pounded. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Destroy everything that ties back to me." She answered with a single word. Done. The next day, I saw the car. It was parked, across the street, black, tinted windows, engine running idle. At first, I told myself it was nothing. But it was still there an hour later. When I stepped outside to throw away trash, the engine revved softly, then went silent. My skin prickled. I went back inside and locked every door. Through the curtain, I could see a faint silhouette behind the windshield, watching. For the first time since faking my death, I felt real fear, not the abstract fear of dying, but the tangible dread of being found. I called Gemma, my voice shaking. "She's here," I whispered. "Naomi's here." Gemma tried to calm me, promising she'd be on her way. I stayed by the window, staring at that car, every second stretching into an eternity. My plan had always relied on control, on outthinking everyone, staying 3 steps ahead, but in that moment, I realized control was slipping from my hands. Naomi had nothing left to lose, and people with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous kind. The car headlights flickered once, then went out completely. The night swallowed the road in silence. My heart hammered in my chest, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. And then I saw Naomi's car parked across the street. It was a strange feeling watching the sister who once loved me turn into my hunter. The first time I saw Naomi step out of that car, I froze. Even from a distance, I could recognize the deliberate way she moved, calm on the surface, coiled like a snake underneath. She wore dark sunglasses, her hair tied back, a leather folder tucked under her arm. I watched her through the lace curtains as she scanned the street, her eyes resting briefly on my porch. For a moment, I thought she could see right through the walls and into my hiding place. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and every breath felt like an explosion waiting to betray me. I waited for her to knock, to shout my name, to storm in and drag me back to the life I'd buried. But she didn't. She just stood there for a few moments, then walked back to her car. It wasn't over, it was a warning. She'd found me, or at least she thought she had. And knowing Naomi, she wouldn't stop until she was certain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the narrow floorboards of my living room, replaying every choice I'd made that led to this. Revenge had been thrilling at first, empowering even. But now it felt like holding a burning match too long. The closer I clutched it, the more it hurt. I could feel my body growing weaker with every passing week. The cancer I thought I'd outsmarted was returning, and Naomi's hunt was wearing me down faster than the disease itself. The next morning, I decided to confront her before she could corner me. I couldn't keep living in fear. I waited until dusk, when the air turned heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. I left my cottage quietly, taking a narrow trail through the woods that led to the small road where she'd parked before. I didn't have a plan, only the desperate need to end this dance between us. When I saw her car again, parked by the clearing, I stepped out from the trees. She was standing by the hood, phone pressed to her ear. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened, and her hand fell to her side. "Clarissa," she breathed, disbelief and anger tangled in her voice. "You're alive." "Yes," I said simply, "and I need you to stop." She took a step toward me, her jaw trembling. "You humiliated me. You ruined me. Do you have any idea what it's been like?" Her voice cracked into something raw, part rage, part grief. "You stole everything that should have been ours." "I didn't steal anything," I said quietly. "I gave it away because it was never meant to poison us like this." "Don't you dare lecture me," she snapped, tears streaking her face. You think you're noble? You think giving it all away makes you better than me? You left me to rot, her voice echoed through the trees. For a brief second, I saw the sister I used to know, the one who'd braid my hair before school, who'd share secrets under blankets when our parents fought. But that girl was gone, swallowed by greed and resentment. I took a step closer, raising my hands. Naomi, it doesn't have to be like this. You can still… She lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the strap of my bag. Where is it? She shouted. The rest of it. I know you didn't give it all away. I tried to pull free, but my body was too weak. The struggle lasted only seconds, yet it felt endless. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. Then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the forest floor. The trees swayed above me, and the cold air stung my face. Naomi was gone. My bag was gone. My body ached in every joint. Somewhere in the distance, I heard an engine starting her car pulling away. I don't remember crawling back to the cottage, only the faint glow of headlights through the trees and Gemma's voice shouting my name when she found me hours later. The world spun as she lifted me up, her hands trembling. The last thing I remember before blacking out again was her whisper. You're not dying today, Clarissa. Not like this. When I woke up, the truth about my condition had changed everything. The doctor said my cancer was in remission, a miracle I never saw coming. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and rain. A soft beeping filled the air, a sound I hadn't expected to hear again. Gemma sat beside me, dark circles under her eyes, her hand clutching mine. You scared me, she whispered. You were out for almost 2 days. Her voice trembled, but I could hear the relief behind it. I blinked at the white ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing I remembered was Naomi's face, twisted in anger, then the forest, spinning into darkness. Gemma told me I'd been found by a hiker who heard the struggle. She'd followed the ambulance to the hospital, using my fake name to keep everything discreet. I wanted to ask about Naomi, but the words wouldn't form. My throat burned, and the fatigue felt like gravity itself. She's gone, Gemma said quietly, reading my thoughts. And honestly, Clarissa, that's a blessing. For the next few days, I drifted between sleep and half-consciousness. The nurses came and went, gentle and efficient, treating me like any other patient. One morning, a young doctor with kind eyes walked in holding a folder. Miss Lay, he said, my alias, we've been reviewing your scans. I braced myself for bad news, but his expression softened into something almost reverent. The tumors. They've shrunk dramatically. There's no active spread. It's extraordinary. You're in remission. The words didn't register at first. Remission. My mind repeated it, turning it over like a fragile stone. That's not possible, I whispered. It was terminal. He smiled faintly. Sometimes the body surprises us. Sometimes survival is stubborn. When he left, Gemma sat down on the edge of the bed, tears glistening in her eyes. You get another chance, she said softly. Don't waste it hiding. Those words pierced through me. For so long, my existence had revolved around escaping my illness, my family, my own anger. But now, with this unexpected gift of time, I couldn't justify living as a ghost anymore. The world thought I was dead, but maybe that could change. Maybe I could reclaim my name and rewrite the ending on my own terms. After weeks of recovery, I left the hospital under the same alias. But my purpose had shifted. I wasn't running now. I was preparing to return. The first thing I did was contact Mr. Reynolds. When he heard my voice, he nearly dropped the phone. Clarissa? My God, I thought. I know, I interrupted, but I'm alive, and I think it's time the world knows it too. He hesitated. Are you sure that's wise? You've exposed a lot of powerful people. I smiled, a quiet confidence blooming in my chest. Let them see what honesty looks like. A month later, I stood before cameras for the first time in years. The press conference was surreal flashes of light, murmured disbelief, hands trembling as reporters took notes. "I faked my death," I said plainly. "Not out of cruelty, but to see the truth behind the masks people wear. What I found changed me. I gave away my fortune not as punishment but as freedom." The reaction was explosive. News outlets replayed my words, interviews flooded in, and strangers wrote letters from across the country, stories of people who'd found courage through mine. They called me everything from selfish to saintly, but I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't performing for anyone. Fiona stood beside me through it all, loyal as ever, while Gemma kept me grounded. The world finally saw me not as the victim of tragedy, but as a woman reborn. Yet one absence haunted me, Naomi. No one had seen her since the night in the woods. Police reports listed her car as missing, her accounts untouched. I wanted to believe she'd simply run away, ashamed, rebuilding somewhere far from me. But part of me knew better. People like Naomi didn't disappear quietly. They waited, plotting, lurking until the next opportunity arose. Then, one gray morning, a single envelope arrived at my door. My heart sank the moment I recognized the handwriting, elegant, looping, familiar. It was Naomi's. Inside was a short note, written in her steady script. "You were right, no threats. No apologies." Just those 3 words. Until one morning, I received a letter with her handwriting. The letter started with 3 words. "You were right." I must have read it 100 times, before I believed it was real. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, Naomi's favorite scent from when we were children. Her handwriting was the same, graceful, deliberate, with those sharp little flourishes at the ends of her letters. But the tone was nothing like the Naomi I knew. The note continued. "You were right. About me. About us. About everything that matters." Then, at the bottom, she'd signed it with her full name, as though reclaiming the part of herself she'd lost. There was a return address, a rehabilitation center in the mountains, 2 states away. For a long time, I just sat there, holding the paper like it might dissolve if I breathed too hard. Gemma found me like that, sitting at the kitchen table, frozen in disbelief. "Is that from her?" she asked cautiously. I nodded. "She's alive," I whispered. "And she's different." Gemma read the note and let out a quiet sigh. "Maybe this is what you both needed. Closure." But I wasn't sure if I wanted closure. I wanted answers. A week later, I made the trip. The rehab center was a quiet, sunlit facility nestled in pine trees, surrounded by wildflowers and silence. When I arrived, the receptionist recognized the name Naomi Gray immediately. "She's been expecting you," she said kindly, leading me down a hallway that smelled of citrus cleaner and hope. When I saw Naomi, I almost didn't recognize her. The sharp edges were gone. She looked thinner, paler, her hair pulled back simply, no makeup hiding the lines around her eyes. When she saw me, she froze, then smiled, a small, genuine curve of the lips I hadn't seen in years. "You came," she said. "I had to." We sat across from each other in the garden courtyard, sunlight flickering through the leaves. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she began to talk. Slowly, haltingly, Naomi told me everything. After the gala, her world had imploded, the company, the lawsuits, the humiliation. She'd started drinking, then spiraled into pills. "I hated you for ruining me," she admitted. "But the truth is, I ruined myself long before that. You just forced me to see it." Her voice broke when she spoke about the night in the woods. "I wasn't going to hurt you, Clarissa. I swear. I just wanted the money. I thought if I could find proof you were alive, I could fix everything. But when you collapsed, I panicked. I thought I killed you." I drove until morning and checked myself into this place the next day. For the first time in years, I reached across and took her hand. It felt fragile, trembling, but human again. "Naomi," I said softly, "you don't owe me forgiveness, just peace." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I want that too." We spent the afternoon talking like sisters again. Not about money or revenge or ghosts, but about childhood, our father, our mistakes. It was as if the years of bitterness had cracked open to let something gentler through. When visiting hours ended, Naomi hugged me tightly. "I'll make things right," she promised. Not with money, with work, real work. Back at my hotel that night, I sat by the window, watching the mountains fade into dusk. I realized something I hadn't felt since before all of it began: peace. Maybe the story wasn't about revenge anymore. Maybe it was about redemption, hers and mine. In the months that followed, Naomi kept her word. She started volunteering at one of the women's shelters I'd founded, helping women find jobs and rebuild their lives. The press called it the Gray Sisters' Redemption. But for us, it wasn't about headlines. It was about healing. One evening, she sent me a photo, her surrounded by smiling women, holding a sign that read, "Hope lives here." Beneath it, she'd written, "You gave me my life back." I smiled at the message, tears filling my eyes. Maybe, after everything, we were finally free. But fate had one final twist in store for me. It started with a call from my lawyer. There was one more clause in my father's will. I was at home, sipping tea by the window, when my phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds. His voice calm but tinged with that familiar weight of seriousness. "Clarissa," he said, "there's something you need to see. It concerns your father's estate and Naomi's." My pulse quickened. I thought everything about that will had been resolved years ago. "What is it now?" I asked, half dreading the answer. He hesitated. "Your father left behind an addendum, one that was only to be opened when both of you were reconciled." The word hung in the air, delicate and impossible. "It's time." 2 weeks later, Naomi and I met at the old law office where it had all begun. It was surreal walking into that building again, the scent of polished wood and dust, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Naomi arrived first, wearing a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair loose, her face free of makeup. For the first time, she looked like the sister I remembered. We greeted each other with a quiet hug, and then Mr. Reynolds brought out a weathered brown envelope marked in our father's handwriting, "To my daughters." As he read, my father's voice came alive in the room, every word echoing like a ghost returned. "If you are hearing this," the letter began, "it means my greatest wish has come true, that my girls have found each other again." Naomi's eyes glistened with tears. He wrote about how money had divided his family for generations, and how he'd hoped his legacy would one day heal the rift instead of deepening it. "I have set aside one final gift," the letter continued. "A property that belongs to both of you, and only both. It cannot be sold or claimed by one alone. It must be used for something that gives back what we took from the world." The address he listed was familiar: an old Groby estate outside the city, the same one where we'd spent summers as children, chasing fireflies and playing hide-and-seek in the attic. Naomi and I exchanged stunned looks. We hadn't been there since our father's funeral. We drove out that afternoon, neither of us saying much. The house stood exactly as we'd left it, tall, faded, and quiet. Dust coated the windows, ivy curled along the walls, but when we stepped inside, the air felt different. Peaceful. Naomi ran her hand along the banister, smiling faintly. "Remember when we used to slide down this thing?" she said. And for a second, we were children again. In the study, we found another letter, this one handwritten and left in a drawer beneath the old globe. It read, "You can't rewrite the past, but you can build something beautiful from its remains. Make this place a home again, not for you, but for others who have nowhere to go." That night, Naomi and I talked for hours by the fireplace. We decided to turn the estate into a retreat for single mothers, a sanctuary where women could rebuild their lives, just like Naomi had rebuilt hers. The idea felt right, as though our father's spirit had been guiding us to it all along. In the months that followed, we worked tirelessly together. Naomi handled outreach and management, while I focused on funding and design. We called it the Haven of Second Chances. Soon, it filled with laughter, children's voices, and the quiet rhythm of hope. For once, Money was doing what it was meant to do, heal instead of divide. Word spread quickly. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Sisters turn family estate into refuge for the broken." Donations poured in from across the country. For the first time, I saw Naomi not as the sister who betrayed me, but as the woman who had finally redeemed herself. And yet, even in the glow of new beginnings, life had a way of reminding me that peace is never permanent. Just when everything felt steady, when the past seemed fully behind us, Mr. Reynolds called again. His tone was grave this time. "Clarissa," he said, "a reporter's been digging into your case. He claims to have evidence about the night of your disappearance." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of evidence?" I asked. There was a pause. "He says your death wasn't an accident." A reporter claimed to have proof that my death was no accident. When the reporter said he had photos from the night of my death, my heart froze. It was as if the air in my office had turned to ice. I held the phone to my ear, unable to speak for several seconds. "Photos?" I finally whispered. Mr. Reynolds exhaled heavily on the other end. "Yes. He claims someone gave them to him anonymously. He wants to meet you in person." My pulse pounded in my ears. For years, my fake death had been the one thing separating my new life from the chaos I'd left behind. If that story unraveled now, everything, the haven, Naomi's redemption, my peace could vanish with it. 2 days later, I agreed to meet the reporter. His name was Daniel Shaw, an investigative journalist known for chasing difficult truths. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with too much light and too little privacy. He was young, sharp-eyed, and nervous, the kind of man who'd seen too many lies and still believed in uncovering them. "Miss Gray," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "I think you'll want to see these." Inside were glossy photos, my sailboat drifting under fog, my car parked at the marina, and, most chillingly, a blurry figure standing on the pier watching it all. The timestamp matched the night of my supposed death. I studied the shape, the posture, the outline of the shoulders, the tilt of the head. It was familiar. Too familiar. Daniel leaned forward. "You weren't alone that night, were you?" I felt my throat tighten. "Where did you get these?" "They were sent to me. Anonymously," he said. "But there's more. Whoever sent them included financial records, wire transfers, property deeds, all connected to the shell accounts used for your disappearance. It looks like someone else orchestrated part of it, not just you." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "That's not possible," I said, my voice shaking. "I handled everything myself." Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "There's one name that keeps appearing in the transfers. It's your sister's." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Naomi. The one person I thought I'd finally made peace with. Could it be true? Had she been part of this from the start? "No," I said softly, shaking my head. "You're wrong." But the evidence didn't lie. Later that night, I went home and opened my old files, the ones I'd locked away after returning from the dead. As I combed through bank statements, donation ledgers, and receipts, the pattern began to appear: small deposits made weeks before my supposed accident, routed through Naomi's old accounts. It didn't make sense. Why would she be involved? I didn't tell her about the reporter. Instead, I called Fiona. "I need you to trace something for me," I said. She didn't ask why, just got to work. 2 days later, she called back, her tone heavy. "Clarissa, he's right. Naomi moved money before you vanished. Not much, but enough to raise questions." My heart pounded as I stared out the window of the estate. Naomi had been working late at the Haven, helping children with their studies, smiling like the woman she was trying to become. Could someone change that much and still hide a secret like this? When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. We were in the empty dining room of the Haven, sunlight slanting across the floor. "Why, Naomi?" I asked. "Why did you move money before I died?" She closed her eyes. "Because I knew." "Knew what?" "That you weren't planning to come back." Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. You think you were the only one making plans, Clarissa? I saw what you were doing. You were giving everything away, preparing to vanish. You looked ready to die before your body even gave up. I couldn't watch you destroy yourself. I shook my head, disbelief twisting in my chest. So you helped me disappear? I made sure you'd survive it, she said quietly. I hired Paul, the fisherman. I sent the money to keep him quiet. I didn't want to expose you, I wanted to save you. You were drowning long before that boat ever touched water. The silence between us felt endless. She had been part of the story all along, not as my enemy, but as the invisible hand guiding me away from the edge. For the first time, I realized Naomi had saved me, not betrayed me. I thought I'd written the ending to my story, but life had one last chapter to give. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Naomi's confession. Every memory I'd clung to, the anger, the betrayal, the grief, it all rearranged itself in my mind like puzzle pieces falling into their true place. She hadn't hunted me out of greed that night at the marina. She'd been watching, trying to make sure I went through with it safely. She hadn't ruined me. She'd protected me, even when I thought she wanted to destroy me. The irony stung. I had spent years building an entire life around punishing her, when all she'd done was save me from myself. Naomi and I sat for hours in that empty dining room of the Haven, the air between us thick with tears and understanding. She told me everything: how she'd discovered my plan by accident, reading one of my drafts hidden in a file labeled Estate Projections. How she'd realized I intended to vanish quietly, leaving no trace. You looked like a ghost before you ever disappeared, she said softly. And I couldn't stand losing you again. I thought back to all the times I'd misread her silence, her coldness. Maybe she hadn't known how to love me in the ways I needed, but that didn't mean she hadn't loved me at all. We were both broken in different ways, bound together by a lifetime of miscommunication and pride. For the first time since childhood, I took her hand without hesitation. You saved me, I whispered. She shook her head, her eyes red. No, Clarissa. You saved both of us. The next few weeks passed like a strange kind of dream. The tension that had shadowed us for years finally lifted. We started working side by side again at the Haven, laughing at little things, sharing coffee in the mornings. The women there noticed the change too. You two have the same eyes, one of them said one afternoon. Naomi smiled, a real, soft smile that made her look younger, almost innocent. For once, I didn't correct her. But peace doesn't erase the past, it just gives it softer edges. Daniel, the reporter, reached out again, this time not as a threat but as an ally. He wanted to publish our story, but with our permission. The truth is bigger than the scandal, he told me. It's about survival, forgiveness, and legacy. Naomi and I talked about it for days. Part of me feared reopening old wounds. Another part knew it might be the only way to close them properly. Eventually we agreed. If we're going to tell it, Naomi said, let's tell it all. And so we did. The interview aired nationwide, titled The Gray Sisters. Beyond the funeral. The world listened as we told everything: my fake death, the inheritance, the charities, the deception, and finally, the forgiveness. I remember sitting under those bright studio lights, Naomi beside me, her hand steady on mine. When the host asked if I regretted it, I said, no, because it led us here to the truth. The response was overwhelming. People from all over wrote letters not about greed or scandal, but about healing. Survivors of abuse, families torn apart by inheritance, siblings who hadn't spoken in decades. They said our story gave them courage to reach out, to forgive, to start over. The Haven became more than just a retreat. It became a symbol. Donations poured in. Volunteers came from across the country. Even Gemma and Fiona, who had stood by me through every secret, were honored for their loyalty at a public ceremony. And yet, one quiet evening after the interview aired, I found myself standing on the balcony of the estate, watching the sunset bleed gold across the horizon. The world finally knew the truth. and I felt empty, but at peace. I had spent so long chasing closure that I almost didn't know what to do once I found it. Naomi joined me, handing me a cup of tea. "Do you ever think about what it all meant?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Every day. I think maybe dying, even if it was only pretend, taught me how to live." She laughed softly. "Then maybe we both had to die a little to find each other again." The breeze carried the sound of laughter from inside the haven. Children playing, women chatting, life moving forward. I breathed it in, feeling the world settle into something gentle. And yet, I still wonder if I truly died that day, or finally began to live. If you're hearing this now, it means my story has reached its final chapter. I recorded those words on a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air feels both alive and nostalgic. The leaves outside the window of the haven fluttered gold and crimson, dancing in a breeze that smelled faintly of salt from the nearby sea. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the microphone. I had learned a lot about endings, that they rarely arrive all at once, and when they do, they're softer than you expect. Years had passed since that night in the woods, since Naomi and I rebuilt everything we once destroyed. My health had started to decline again, quietly this time. The doctors called it a slow recurrence, but I called it a reminder, a nudge from fate that every borrowed moment eventually comes due. I wasn't afraid. I'd already cheated death once, and in the time I'd gained, I'd learned how to truly live. The haven had grown far beyond what either of us imagined. Dozens of women lived here now, some with children, some rebuilding alone. Every hallway echoed with laughter and second chances. Naomi ran the day-to-day operations, her calm voice guiding people the way I never could. Watching her with them was like watching sunlight fall through stained glass, fractured but beautiful. She had become the kind of woman our father would have been proud of. I spent my final months writing letters, mostly. One for each person who had shaped my journey. A long one for Gemma, thanking her for standing by me when I was at my weakest. Another for Fiona, who had risked everything for my secret. And, of course, one for Naomi, though hers was the hardest to write. How do you thank someone for saving your soul? When I wasn't writing, I'd sit by the garden, watching the women plant flowers in the soil where our childhood swing once hung. Life had a strange sense of symmetry. The ground where Naomi and I had once argued now bloomed with color. Every blossom felt like an apology answered. One evening, Naomi joined me on the porch. The sun was setting, painting everything in amber. "You look tired," she said gently. "Maybe you should rest." I smiled. "I've been resting all my life. I think I'm finally awake." She didn't argue, just took my hand and held it until the stars came out. As the weeks passed, I knew the end was near. I didn't tell Naomi at first. I didn't want her to carry that weight. But she must have sensed it, sisters always do. One night, she found me sitting by the fire, finishing the last page of my memoir. "You've written enough," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe," I replied, "but stories only end when they're told." I asked her for one promise that the haven would live on, no matter what. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It will," she said. "I'll make sure of it." When I finally closed my eyes for the last time, it wasn't in fear or regret, it was in gratitude, the kind that fills every corner of your being. I'd spent a lifetime running from death, only to discover that facing it was the only way to be free. Months later, at my real funeral, my second one, the room was nothing like before. There were no designer dresses, no whispers about inheritance. The women from the haven filled the space, children clutching flowers, laughter mingling with tears. Naomi stood before them, reading my letter aloud. My voice echoed through the speakers, the same recording I'd made that autumn morning. "To those who came into my life when I had nothing left to give," I said in the message. "Thank you for teaching me that legacy isn't measured in money or power, but in love that outlives us. Don't count the guests, count the blessings." The final shot of the video played across the screen, footage of me walking along the shoreline, waves lapping at my feet. The camera panned slowly toward the horizon, then faded to white. In the silence that followed, Naomi whispered to the crowd, she finally found her peace. And for once, they didn't come to take. They came to give love, tears, and gratitude. And this time, they finally knew who I was.